Well, this is the type of music that you could tuck firearms by, as most people understand. When you're out at the range, you like to have a little classical music going on in the background.
When you're shooting your muskets.
Yes. Maybe your blunderbuss.
There you go.
That would be from that era. I wanted to mention Forrest Anderson is en route. Todd Eccles, though, is already in the studio with us. Bill Colley, too, on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Well, since Forrest isn't here yet, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. You got some news coming up there, you were telling me.
Yeah, so I do a podcast, and it's called the Patriot Defense Podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher, and a bunch of other podcast type apps. But I've got a guest coming this week. I got Pastor Paul Thompson is coming in, and we're gonna talk about church security. We're gonna talk about how where religion and self defense collide. We're gonna talk about an article that was published in our local paper earlier this week about by a gentleman who thinks a little differently than Pastor Paul does. So we are going to discuss that and kind of see where that goes. So I'm looking forward to that. As you know, weather willing, as long as he can get down my driveway. I don't know what's going to happen weather-wise. But
Yeah, well, it's a short walk if he
yeah,
has to do that.
we'll record that on Saturday and hopefully have that up for download on Sunday. So
And we want to point out, of course, that there's a number of different places people can hear that, as you point out, but Spotify is your main go-to.
yeah, Spotify and iTunes is the main go-to. Yeah, and then it's on a bunch of other podcatcher apps. So you just got to kind of find me. You can go to my website, which is Patriot Defense, patriotdefense13.com, patriotdefense13.com. Go there and you can listen to it there as well.
I wanted to point out Forrest Anderson also joining us from Washington Street Pawn. And Forrest, of course, been a busy guy. The shop reopened after a couple of days off for the holiday. And so you were back open, last Friday?
Yeah, and it's
Hold
been
on. For some reason, Forrest's microphone isn't responding. Go ahead.
check 1 2.
Try that one. Yeah, that's better than microphone anyway.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been really busy at the shop. We've had a ton of guns come in. People upgraded over the holidays, and they went from some older stuff, some new stuff. We get some really cool old stuff like vintage 1886 Winchester in 4082, made in 1888. We've got a bunch of that older stuff that's come in and coming in this weekend. So yeah, stop by the shop if you want to look at something really cool and vintage. We have that. Then we just got shelves full of really great trade-ins. Winchester Model 70 Super Shadow in 338 Win Mag, all priced to sell. You make us a decent offer this weekend, we'll take it. We're bursting at the seams with firearms. So
We were talking just as Forrest came in, of course, about people who could defend themselves in churches, and we saw that done in Texas a couple of weeks ago. That's still a big story because a lot of people are trying to find ways to explain it away and say, it shouldn't happen. And we talked about this a bit last week, but there was a newspaper column from the pastor of a mainline church here in town that he wrote this past weekend for the local paper, where he said that Jesus and guns don't mix. Obviously, he just told everybody out there that his church is a gun-free zone, and I don't know that that's probably a good idea. I'm not recommending anything. Trust me, wouldn't want to see anything tragic happen. But I don't know if you really wouldn't know if somebody was coming to your church in many cases, and if they were, carrying it. If they're concealing, you're not going to
Yeah,
know.
if they're doing it right, concealed means concealed, right? I
yeah,
mean, that's the way I look at it.
and that's just it, is to tell people they can't exercise their Second Amendment rights. I mean, there's the LDS faith in general. I mean, their main leadership in Salt Lake said they don't want people carrying at church. But it's the hypocrisy that bothers me. At the
Mhm.
same time, they're telling their people, you can't carry your gun at church.
Yeah.
They're building a multi-million-dollar training facility
Yeah.
for their private security guards for the leaders of the church, which really irks me because the elitists are gonna say, or the people in power are gonna say, hey, we want protection. We'll have guns around us, but you can't have them around you. I don't agree with that philosophy.
This local, I guess, pastor is what you want to call him. This is actually, I posted his article up on my Facebook page, but this is a quote at the very end of his article that he wrote. It says, "So when it comes to firearms, you can commit to following Jesus and in no circumstances use that gun to harm another human being, or you can buy that gun to protect yourself and your property and choose to live a different path than Jesus. But you cannot equate attempts to regulate firearms with an attack on your religion. That is, if your religion is about following Jesus."
Is he saying then that you cannot, if you own firearms, then you're not a good Christian?
That's pretty much what he said. You can't follow Jesus. You can't follow his beliefs if you own a firearm with the intent to use it to defend yourself or others.
They said for any reason, I
It-
believe.
He might,
Yeah, read that.
Let me pull it back up again. Let's see. So when it comes to firearms, you can commit to following Jesus and in no circumstances use that gun to harm another human being.
In no circumstances.
No circumstances.
So that means even to defend your home and family. So if someone kicks down your front door, you got to stand there and let them do what they're going to do.
Or you're not a Christian.
And I don't agree with
I
that.
don't agree with that either.
I don't know. I don't know what to look at. I'd be interested to see some of the parishioners' viewpoints on that. What their thoughts
Right.
are.
Yeah, as I say, if they're concealed, he may not even know how many people in his church are already carrying.
Right.
We have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX with the Gun Guys.
Good morning, guys. Bill, big fan of the show. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I remember when the gun thing came out, and a lot of social media, I was seeing people go back and forth. A lot of the same opinions that were just expressed on the show. The only place that I would intersect a thought as far as hypocrisy goes is that the church leadership never ever told the membership that if you're caught carrying a gun, you'll be disciplined, excommunicated, or whatever out of the church. They basically just said, look, you really don't want a bunch of people carrying guns on church property. I think they were trying to get out ahead of the whole, gun nonsense and whatnot at that moment. But since then, there's never been another thing said. And in all honesty, being a member of the church and for quite some time, this is one of those things I think it's kind of like a wink of the eye. Like, look, we're going to say this because, we don't want a lot of the other side coming at us. But just know that you're okay. We know there's a ton of law enforcement in our church. There's a lot of Second Amendment strong believers in our church, and preppers in our church. We're very big on, preparing for catastrophes and year supplies, food, of storage, and so on and so forth. Big outdoors people, especially in this area. But that would be the only thing that I would intersect in that thought, is that the church never followed up with, if you were caught carrying, that you would be disciplined or excommunicated from the church.
Right, and I see where you're coming from, and I'm a member. I'm an LDS church member as well. I was born into it, so I've been for something like 43 years now, and I see where you're coming. But the fact that they even came out and said what they said, I mean, that they're bowing to the side, they're bowing to the left, I can't even wrap my mind around that, because we do what we do. We know what is right. They're not going to take that stance on something else that they hold, dear to them.
The Constitution has always been said to be
Yep.
sacred in the LDS Church, and the Second Amendment of the Constitution is about an individual's right to carry and defend their country and defend themselves against tyranny and all comers. So to say that, to make the statement that we don't want people carrying church, but then at the same time be spending millions
Yep.
of dollars on a training facility so they can train armed security for themselves.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Is a mentality that, yeah, we want protection, but we're going to ask you guys not to defend yourselves.
And we're gonna publicly come out and announce that there's no firearms in our church. And when they've had situations in the past where someone's come in and shot people.
And I understand that there are law enforcement but they can't be. I mean, if you've been in an LDS church, there's a bunch of classrooms, there's a bunch of
Right.
different portions. They can't have a law enforcement officer in every room. But I think an individual should, if they choose, have the right to defend themselves, have the right to carry responsibly. No one's saying that some guy should blow in the Wild West and be packing his 12-gauge shotgun around the church, openly, and nobody wants that display at church. But should someone be able to choose to responsibly concealed carry, they should be able to do that.
We've got a caller looking to join us. And caller, you're on the air with the Gun Guys on KLIX at 816.
Good morning. You finally found a topic that's more hot than guns. It's called church and guns. I think it's in the verbiage of what was said, and I brought it to my bishop that it was cowardless. And I said, if you ever find out that I am carrying a gun and you tell me that I cannot carry the gun, I will have no problem standing up and walking out. That's not a problem. If you feel that the Constitution that gave the churches the rights to have their religion in this country is infringing on anybody else's rights for safety, then I have no problem standing up and walking out. And most of the people I've talked to don't disagree. But the verbiage is not you can't. They don't recommend it. That's the problem with it. It's so vague, and what you guys are saying is absolutely right. It didn't need to be said at all. Period. There was a church shooting. One ended badly, and one ended by the person carrying a gun ending it, which is the right thing to do. So it's a hard topic, and I don't think you're going to have anybody that agrees 100% one way or the other.
Well, and I thank you for the call. And of course, this got started with this columnist, this column from this pastor locally, from one of our local churches, who, as we talked earlier, if you carry a gun, you can't be a good Christian. Is he suggesting if you carry a gun and even if you use it for self-defense, you're going to hell? I guess this is the logical way I would follow his argument, right?
Oh, that's exactly the way I'd follow his argument to a certain extent. You can't be a good Christian. He pretty much said in his closing statement, if you own a firearm and you intend to and you use that firearm to protect yourself or your family or others with it, you're not following God correctly. You can't claim to follow God.
If you use the firearm and harm someone for any purpose, even in self-defense.
Yep.
And I don't agree with that.
No, either do I.
So I don't know. I would be interested to hear people's take on that, because that's taking it a step further. Not only is that saying, hey, I don't want people carrying in church, that's saying if you do carry, you're not a follower of Jesus.
Right. And tell that to Jack and the two gentlemen that died a couple weeks ago when they stopped that shooter and saved 240 plus people in that church.
Yeah.
I mean, tell them that what they did, that they're going to go to hell for that.
Well, I think some people were just raised in certain climates where nobody had a gun near them, and so they just think it's terribly wrong, and they want to impose that value on everyone else. And make a judgment about people who actually own firearms.
As long as we're interested in fairness, I would love to see maybe a church pastor who's okay with people defending themselves and exercising their Second Amendment rights to get an op-ed article.
They actually rotate those articles, I think, through the local pastors, so they'll get their chance, from what I hear.
We'll take a short break. We've got more coming up with the Gun Guys. Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn, Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, and Bill Cully on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. It's 8:20, and we're at 21. This is one of those breaks where we barely get a chance to clear our throats, and then all of a sudden the music fires back up.
I couldn't close up Facebook fast enough.
Yeah. I'm not going to cough now. That's not good. We wanted to point out we're talking firearms today on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Well, Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn, and Bill Cully. And telephone number, if you'd like to reach us, is 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. Somewhere here I have a piece of copy that I've been holding on to for the last couple of days. Virginia's largest city becomes Second Amendment constitutional city. Virginia Beach Now they have a big long street there called Kali Avenue. Just wanted to share that. Uh, Virginia Beach voted by a 6-4 margin at its at city council to become, and they have 460,000 people they represent. They're now going to be a Second Amendment sanctuary.
They are going to be.
Yeah,
So where did all? I mean, there's that many more people in those few counties that actually voted in all these yahoos. I mean, there's that many more people.
No, I think what happened was people just
Didn't show
up
up.
and vote.
Yeah, that's
and that
kinda what I was
tells
getting at.
people what can happen in one election cycle. Virginia goes from being one of the most pro Second Amendment states
Yeah.
to now passing very restrictive gun legislation in one election cycle. And they will do it. Their intent is
Yeah.
we know we're not going to get reelected, but we're going to jam it all through.
This is their goal.
And they're also they're redistricting. They're also passing voter registration laws that will allow people to show up with their power bill to prove, no photo ID, no government issued ID. You can show up with a power bill and say, this is where I live. Here's a power bill. I want to vote.
we've got a caller. Caller, you're next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Hey, I was just listening to you guys in this gun thing, and just from my perspective, I love being next to a guy that knows how to handle his gun. And when I go someplace, I hope he's next to me, because I don't do guns well, and I figure it's really nice to sit next to somebody that I know knows his guns. So, it's a safety thing for me, and I'm not even a gun person.
I think
So
that's
appreciate you guys.
I think your point is deeper than what people think is. It's your responsibility, if you're going to carry,
Hmm.
to know what you're doing. If you make the choice, I'm going to go ahead and carry, and I'm going to carry in public, and I'm going to carry in church, you better know what you're doing, and you need to take the time to practice, because at some point you may have to defend yourself, your family, or others. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to be a tragedy. However, if you're prepared, like Jack, we keep bringing him up,
Right.
you can make the shot that matters when it matters.
And not only being prepared and trained up, but you carry correctly. You carry concealed means concealed. You have a proper belt. You have a proper holster. You have a proper firearm, one that is safe, because you are going out and you are around other people. Some people may not be gun people, and you need to be safe when you're out in public with your firearm. You need to be responsible. You need to know what you're doing.
And I love the caller's thought there, but realize what he said is there are people, there's children, there's people of all walks of life who just, you know what? I'm not a gun dude. It's not for me.
Hmm.
However, I do appreciate people that carry. They're counting on you to have done your work, to have done your homework, so that when the situation arises, you will be prepared and you will be an asset.
We have another caller. Caller, you're on the air with the Gun Guys on KLIX at 824.
Good morning, Bill and the gun guys.
Morning.
We have a Declaration of Independence and a Constitution that basically would follow biblical mandate of what would be called the lesser magistrate, which would be the lesser people act against tyrannical government or king. So in that, we have a Second Amendment. And then we talk about churches, and you can't be a Christian and carry a gun or use a gun. And there's no biblical scripture that would support that. The Bible's really clear about murder, but it also is clear about defense of innocent life. And so the people in the churches, the pastors in the churches who are opposed to people protecting themselves are just biblically off base. It's a religious opinion, like lots of other things in this world, but it isn't biblically solid doctrine.
Well, thank you for the call. Yesterday I had a conversation with Ken Mansell from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. They train people from church teams. The Sheriff's Department does. They have a program for this. It's been in place for a while. Then you're implying, if you claim that you can't be a Christian if you're carrying. Is he saying that by training people, the Sheriff's Department is aiding Satan? Or if he says you can't use it at all, is he even talking about law enforcement or military? You got to also have an ability to understand the practicality of the real world.
Yeah, he's throwing a wide net and he's ensnaring a bunch of people. So that's a good question. Military, law enforcement. I mean, gun-free world. Is that what this guy's getting at? Sounds
Uh,
like it.
I just, this is why the great thing about the United States is that with freedom of religion, you have a lot of choices. You can get up, as one caller said, walk out of a church and find another. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX with the Gun Guys.
I had a grandson who served a mission in Washington, D.C. South Mission, and he, which is Northern Virginia, and he said he had people from, the politicians from Washington, D.C. that were LDS back in that area came to that church, and he said they all had guards with their guns.
Of course they did. I mean, that's the way. I hate to go down this road, but it's the upper echelon, or what I'm going to call the elitist. They feel like they need to be protected, but yet they tell us, they recommend that we don't protect ourselves. And that's insane to me.
And the thought would be is, well, these guys are licensed law enforcement. We're going to allow them to carry. So that's great if you happen to be sitting in the same room as they are.
Right.
But what if you're not? So what they're saying is, hey, if you happen to sit in the same room as us, we will ensure your protection. However, if you're in a classroom with 10 8-year-olds by yourself, and somebody walks in, you just got to stand there and take whatever comes at you.
Right.
That's not the way it should be. Each individual, as long as they are responsible, should have the ability. I mean, if there's someone who comes into church carrying irresponsibly, it's perfectly acceptable for clergy to approach them and say, "Hey, you're not carrying responsibly.
Right.
You're being irresponsible with this firearm.
Because it is private property.
We're going to ask you to leave until you can figure it out." And I would expect them to do that. If they didn't do that, I'd be upset with them. If they didn't approach the guy and say, "Hey, you need to carry a different way, and you need to carry more responsibly. This isn't a toy. Go home, figure it out, and then when you can carry responsibly, come on back."
Well,
However, all the people that do it right, you shouldn't make them feel guilty for exercising their Second Amendment right.
it's pretty interesting. I see these posts all the time on Facebook that this business over here says they don't want guns. This business over here says they don't want guns. So what do people say? Well, we're going to not go in there. We're not going to give them our money. Well, when a church says that, we have a lot of people getting up, jumping to the defense. Well, they didn't really say it that way. This is what they really meant. So it's like, what side of the fence are you on?
We've got more coming up with the Gun Guys. It's 8:30. Well, practically 8:30. Close to 8:30. Reasonably close. It's 23. Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn, Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, Bill Colley handling the telephones on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com.